Os personagens da série X-Men surgiram nos quadrinhos nos anos 60. E ganharam as telas nas adaptações para o cinema.
Get together and hold this line.
Os criadores da turma de Wolverine foram Stan Lee e Jack Kirby. Porém, a partir de 1975, o inglês Chris Claremont passou a ser o responsável pelos X-Men na Marvel Comics, função que desempenhou até 1991. Uma das principais marcas dele foi a criação de personagens femininas fortes e superpoderosas. Desentendimentos com a editora provocaram uma pausa. Claremont deixou os quadrinhos em segundo plano, mas ele voltou várias vezes para os Mutantes, escreveu novas séries e participou como consultor das primeiras produções para o cinema. Até hoje, ele é o autor que mais criou histórias para os X-Men e também centenas de personagens que povoaram milhões de revistas em quadrinhos vendidas em todo o mundo.
Stan Lee created the X-Men stories in the 60s, but only in the 70s. They had this huge success. When you started writing it, what were the main changes you did?
Well, what actually happened was, at the end of the 60s, there was a sequence, about 10 issues done by Roy Thomas and Neil Adams that were incredibly successful. But the production and the sales reports were so slow that by the time Marvel found out about it, everyone had moved on to other assignments, other companies. There was no way to exploit it. So they put the book on hold for years until they figured out what to do. When Roy, who was editor-in-chief then, asked Len Wein to recreate it with Dave Cockrum, the artist, the idea was, we want to try and appeal to a more international audience. So let's change it from the way it originally was, where everybody was WASP, as we call it in the States.
White.
Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And go more global, more international, and the ultimate idea was to try and sell it overseas as well as in America. So Len and Dave created the new X-Men, Storm, Colossus, Banshee was already existing, Nightcrawler, Wolverine, and they launched it. But then with the first issue, Len moved on to other projects, and because I'd been hanging around saying, this is cool, can I help? He turned to me and said, do you want to write it? And I said, you betcha.
Did you also give the characters a more psychological complexity?
Well, when I took over, they were newborn. So the artist Dave Cockrum and I were friends, and we would basically go out to lunch and hang out for hours talking about who the characters are, what we wanted them to do, how their lives would fit together. We have Storm, who is African. She's just come to the United States. She's someone who grew up in the mountains of East Africa in Kenya. When we first see her, she's totally native. Now she's come to the most urban city in the world, so we like to think. How does she react to that? Well, it was 1974. How do you react to being in a city of 8 million people? How do you react to clothes? How do you react to attitudes? We have Colossus, who's been growing up on a collective farm in the Soviet Union. Now he's in the United States. What does that feel like? Nightcrawler has spent all of his life in a carnival. He's not in a carnival anymore. How does that feel? Wolverine, is he comfortable in a crowd? We decided, no, he's not. You get scared of him. So as we answered the questions and built the characters, we fleshed out where they came from, how they feel about being in this urban setting, what their history is, and then where we go from there, how they interact and how they move forward, and how they make friends, how they deal with the modern world that they're in, how they deal with the superheroics of where they are. And each step led to the next. First with me working with Dave Cockrum, then with John Byrne. And we built gradually the whole structure of the X-Men, foundation, first floor, second floor, and started down the road that led to what we have today.
Was John Wayne really an inspiration for Wolverine?
Not an inspiration, more like a touchstone. I mean, the thing with Wayne is that you look at him and you think this is who he is, but I'm a great aficionado of John Wayne's work with John Ford. And you can see textures and pieces of character that are different from what you think of as Wayne in a film like The Searchers. You see a harder, crueler, more uncharitable and even terrifying figure than you're used to seeing in all of his standard westerns. And you take that and you want to, okay, where do I find that? What do we find in Wolverine that makes him more than just a cliche? And that was what Frank Miller and I talked about when we were building the Wolverine miniseries. Frank didn't want to draw a cliche. He didn't want to do 4 issues of violence, and neither did I, because that was what everyone would expect. What I wanted to get at was what was underneath the skin, who he really was, how he felt, what his dreams were, what his terrors were. How could we find a way to take this icon and make him human and relatable to an audience that ranged from 13 to 30? And we figured it out.
Who is the worst enemy of Wolverine? Himself?
I would say pretty much, because he keeps dreaming of being a normal person, of having a life, of meeting someone, falling in love, living happily ever after. And there's this animal within him that won't let him do it. You saw this in the first Wolverine movie with Hugh Jackman and Lev Schreiber as Wolverine and Sabretooth. Sabretooth doesn't care. He embraces the monster. Whereas Logan he hates the monster. He wants it out of him, and yet he needs it. He knows that he can't be apart from it, yet he's looking for a way to fight it.
Do you think that everybody has an identification with this? We fight with the animal we have inside us.
To a greater or lesser extent, yes. We all struggle with the brighter and darker sides of our nature. We all want to think of ourselves as heroes, as people of courage, as people of nobility. But you run into a moment and you find yourself reacting in a way that is not in tune with the idea, and you realize you have a way to go. And the thing with Wolverine is that he knows he has a way to go, but he keeps on trying. No matter what the challenge, he always comes back to the struggle, because the goal is so important to him that he won't give up. And theoretically, one hopes that the reader will take that inspiration and use it in their own lives. I find myself trying to do it. and not always succeeding. It is a struggle.
You graduated in acting and political theory in New York in the 70s. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of political student movements at that time. Were they an influence to the racial segregation, you know, this speech against this segregation that we have in the X-Men stories?
I think they were a catalyst. But a lot of that also grew out of the fact that I'm an immigrant. By birth, I'm English. So my parents came over to the United States in the 50s, getting away from rationing, from post-war England, trying to build a better life for themselves. And I think that was part of the struggle I brought years later to the X-Men. The idea of me as a writer is that if the characters can find a way to build a connection from one to the other, to build a life, to build lasting friendships and relationships, maybe that will carry over to reality outside the comics.
This is sitting around drinking cocoa and getting funny looks from rich people.
Yeah? Well, next time, plan your own darn vacation.
Oh, share, wait.
Talking about Sunspot, your Brazilian character, you wrote about him, you wrote scenes in Copacabana, but this is your first time here in Rio.
I wish I'd done it 30 years ago.
Is anything going to change in his story?
I wish it were. I'm not writing the comics anymore, so the ability to change his story is out of my hands. On the other hand, the ability to write, I'm writing novels now for young adults, and to incorporate that into the novels, to come up with characters and situations in prose, I think is a lot more fun and has a lot more interesting potential, because this is my stuff, not a corporation's icons, so I can play with it a lot more, I hope eloquently, a lot more passionately, a lot more surprisingly than you can in a comic. There you have to always bear in mind that at some point a boss will come in and say, you can't do this, or yes, you killed off Jean, but we're bringing her back. So annoying. Because that was the beauty of killing Jean. Horrible as it is to talk about killing a character you love, the fact that we did it, the fact that we said this is true, gave the book a tremendous credibility with our readers, and they could never take it for granted again. And to me, that was wonderful. We had suspense for the first time in generations, and it also allowed the opportunity to bring in new characters. When Marvel decided to resurrect Jean, I went in and said, look, here's my pitch. Don't bring back Jean, bring back her older sister. She has superpowers, she's available for the X-Men. You have the 5 original characters, but the beauty is this character isn't spoken for. She's not automatically Scott Summers' girlfriend. So Bobby could be interested, Warren could be interested, Hank could be interested, Scott could be interested. You have romantic suspense.
And why do you need romance in this story?
Everyone needs romance. Because it's a primal reality. It's a primal need, a primal reality. Kids will accept it because, oh, icky, grown-up stuff. But for the teenagers, for the young adults, for the adults reading the book, it's a facet of their lives, and seeing how these characters approach a relationship might help them with their relationships, or you might sit there and say, yes, you can do this. No, you shouldn't do this. Don't choose him, choose her, choose it, whatever. I mean, in television, you have episode after episode showing romance. The worst thing they ever do is have that romance come to fruition. Getting two characters married is a kiss of death.
And could you tell me your true opinion about the movies based on X-Men stories? And could you tell me your true opinion about the movies based on X-Men stories?
Slightly long story. In 1998, Lauren Schuler Donner, the producer, had a meeting with me and Bob Harris and the Marvel people and Bryan Singer in New York, where we were talking about the X movies. And that was when we started trying to put it all together. So I worked with her for the next year or so, and then management changed and everything got complicated. But Lauren and I became friends, and she's been running the X-Men movies ever since, and she is brilliant. I have never seen anyone manage things, run things as well as she does, with as strong a vision and as gifted an instinct in terms of casting and pulling the pieces together. I mean, plucking Hugh Jackman off the stage in London, throwing him on a plane to New York, giving him a screen test, throwing him out to LA, and the next thing he knows, he's on the set as Wolverine. And as he himself has said, the rest is history. Her sense of casting in terms of the X-Men was just impeccable. I mean, Ian McKellen as Magneto, Patrick Stewart as Xavier, Halle Berry as Aurora. Oh, you run down the list of characters, and Famke Janssen. Rebecca Stama, Rebecca, because she got divorced, is Rebecca Romijn as Mystique. It's just wonderful. And then, of course, with each film, it got better. I mean, I'm sorry, it's like Kelsey Grammer as the Beast.
Ah! But what was your reaction when you saw it first?
My reaction is always mixed. Part of me is like incredibly, that's so cool, Hugh Jackman just said my line. Part of me is, oh my God, there's my character brought to life by an actor I respect. Part of me is like, why didn't they do this? But I have to think in the end, if I were so brilliant, I'd be making the film, not him. So if I ever get the chance, then I'll see if I can fall on my face or not. But until then, I have to respect the choices the director makes and have faith in him, have faith in the producer who I do trust. I mean, it'll be interesting seeing what happens in a year and a half with Wolverine, because this is, the intent, I believe, is to adapt the graphic novel that Frank Miller and I did. This is something that Lauren has wanted to do for as long as I've known her, which is now 15 years. It's what she wanted to do as Wolverine 1, except that the studio insisted they do an origin first. So I'm tremendously eager to see how it turns out. And if there are any changes, and if there are, what kind of changes? Will they make me crazy or not?
6 years I've been here. No one knew me, and then you show up. And the next day she's dead.
I tried to warn you.
Why didn't you tell me you was Victor?
I didn't know.
Why?
I swear on my son's life, I didn't.
You created more than 100 characters, and you wrote 9 novels, as far as I'm keeping this count correct.
10, but the 10th one isn't published.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where is the fountain of your imagination? How can you have so many inspirations?
Oh, that's easy. Every month, I have to pay the mortgage. My kids are in school. My wife looks over the kitchen table and says, hammers on the table and says, bills, bills, bills. For me, it's instinct. Someone asked me, do I love writing? And I said, I love acting. Acting was a passion. But what about writing? I said, well, do you love breathing? And they said, what do you mean? Do you love breathing? I said, no. Well, I don't either. But I have to do it or I die. Writing is exactly the same. I don't love it because it transcends love. It's what I do. If I don't write, I have no life. I have no existence. That's my way of expressing myself. I can't look at a room or at a person or at a conversation and not have it go into the back of my mind and click into something more than it is. It's just the way I'm wired. And for me, it's fun. The miracle is that I do it in a way that seems to impress publishers and attract readers. My fingers are crossed that I can keep up the momentum and do it for as long as I can.
So, Chris Claremont, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for this interview. It was such a great honor.
The pleasure was
Thank
mine,
you.
believe me.
Thank you so much.